Hi, everyone, and welcome to our bi-weekly BSIC webinar series. Today, we'll be hosting Clyde Vanel, Assembly Member of New York State. By way of background, Clyde Vanel was elected to the New York State Assembly on November 8, 2016. He served the 33rd Assembly District of Queens, New York, which includes the neighborhoods of Cambria Heights, St. Albans, Hollis, Queens Village, Bellerose, and parts of Floral Park. By way of background, Clyde Vanel is an attorney, entrepreneur, private pilot, and community advocate from Cambria Heights. He previously served as Chief of Staff for New York State Senator James Sanders. Clyde Vanel is also the owner and operator of Vanel Law Firm, PC, where he focuses on intellectual property law, business law, and wills estate planning. Clyde is also an internet entrepreneur who's the owner and operator of trademarkready.com, which provides trademark filling and protection services. In addition to all this, Clyde was the owner and operator of Vanel on First, a restaurant, bar, and lounge in Lower Manhattan for 5 years. He's also the founder of New York Metro chapter of the Black Pilots of America. This organization trains and exposes the community and youth to the field of aviation. Clyde Vanel has worked extensively in political community empowerment, has helped many community members become involved with and informed with the community regarding elections and political matters, which we'll talk about today. And Clyde has mentored young men with Eagle Academy in the Bronx and Queens, and the Young Men's Rites of Passage with the Allen MAE Church in Jamaica, Queens. He holds a JD from Boston University School of Law, where he served as the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Science and Technology Law. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Aviation Administration and is an Associate of Applied Science in Aerospace Technology from Farmingdale State College, where he served as the student government president. With so many things that you've been doing, Clyde, we want to welcome you and say how appreciative we are of having you today on this call. And we're excited to talk to you and have your perspective on, what has been going on for the past year in technology, from a civil rights movement, and from, health management perspective as an assembly member. So thank you for being here.
Well, Vanessa, listen, thank you for having me. I really respect what you guys are doing in this organization. I respect all that you have been doing with respect to not just technology, but how you marry technology and social good and social impact, which is very, very powerful. And we see that, now we're in a time where it's very important to use some of these greatest tools to be able to do the best social good. And that's part of the reason why we have our relationship, because I respect what you guys have been doing. And I think it's very important that we have these conversations. And it's very important for people in the technology industry to lend their expertise, lend their experience to help governments, to help municipalities, to help people make this world a better place. And I think that's what you're doing. That's why I am so excited to be here. And in particular with blockchain technology, just looking at the virtues of blockchain technology, we're at a place, and we're going to speak more about the pandemic and what government's response is and what New York's response was. But just looking at blockchain, what's very important is that when it comes to fighting this invisible enemy, we have to make sure that we properly record human transactions. We have to properly record interactions between humans. When we talk about how do we fight this virus, we are really investing in very much so, not only in trying to find a vaccine, but in a contact tracing program. What does that mean? That means that if we find someone that tests positive before coronavirus, we want to make sure that we want to check to see all your transactions between people, between humans, that going back a certain time, because that's the way this virus is transmitted through people. Blockchain technology is very interesting. If we look at the Bitcoin blockchain, or we look at any blockchain, Ethereum, whatever blockchain it is, you can go back and see transactions from transaction 1, and we trust it. It's very interesting to use, and we talked about, the former CDC chair is a technology person, looking into using or trying to use blockchain technology to be able to track these kinds of transactions. It's very interesting to see how we can do that, because it's about trust, right? And we have to make sure that the information we get from people, we trust. And that information is very important, because, that's going to help our outcome. And we have to make sure that in the use of blockchain and the virtues of blockchain is something that's very important, given this kind of pandemic that we're fighting. So that's why this conversation is so timely.
Thanks, and thanks for this great intro and almost segue to my first question. You've been very involved in driving the conversation with your constituents on innovation and technology. What has been your role in the recent years in driving that conversation, and why?
So what's interesting was, I think it was last week, where the CEOs of some of the major big tech companies came before Congress. And tech, and just putting, you guys in the tech bag, the tech industry has a particular kind of relationship with governments now, and governments around the world. It's very important for us to communicate, to build a stronger relationship. When we have an antagonistic kind of relationship, that hurts everyone. I believe that it's important for and when I first got into office, I found that there was the tenor of the relationship between the tech community and Washington, Albany, City Hall, should be improved, because it can help. It can help more and help all of us. The conversation, but that's not Vanessa, that's not a new thing, as a matter of fact. Throughout history, there's been technologies that disrupt the status quo. And throughout history, people have responded certain ways. And if we are not careful, we can repeat the bad history for when it comes to innovation and technology. And I want us to be able to be smart about how we use technology moving forward. And this organization is a great example of showing how technology could be used for social good.
So I would like to understand, what is the role of New York's Assembly and government to ensure that everyone has equal access to this technology and reducing the digital divides?
So one of government's main role is, one, protect people. But another very important role is to ensure the general welfare. We have to make sure that people have access, and we have to make sure that we have a fair environment. We have to make sure that we have, meaning that people have the opportunity to reach their potential, to be able to live a decent life, to be able to have a good job, to be able to live in decent housing, to be able to retire with dignity, but to be able to have access to information. Now, Vanessa, in 2020, having access to information is a civil right. Having adequate access to the internet is something that is becoming a fundamental right in our state, in the country, and in the world. What's interesting is, having access to the transmission of information is a basic utility. We had a few basic utilities: electricity, heat, gas, telephone to communicate, but now data. Having access to the transfer of data. Vanessa, if communities are not connected to the internet, how are kids going to be educated in 2020 in a time such as this, where many, if not all, students must have either all or part of their learning distance learning? That's how important these conversations are.
That's a great point. And I recently read, no longer than yesterday, an article on the New York Times, which explained a very different experience from two, high school students, one of which did not have a computer at home, and then the one who had. And basically, the first one just couldn't access the online education that was provided by schools during this time of the pandemic. Is there anything that government can do or is initiating?
Of course. Number one, so one of the things that we've done in New York City is we have, in New York State, we have provided hardware, software, and access to the internet. So we have a very aggressive program, and we've worked a lot with private companies, but a very aggressive program to make sure that no child was left without the hardware to be able to distance learn. So that means tablets for, so we had a very aggressive tablet program. So that's one. Two, we also found out that not every family has, access to broadband, have an internet connection. So we made sure that these tablets were connected to the internet. Now, that's number two. So we made sure that the tablets had data plans. Three, we had to make sure now, we're fighting to make sure that the area has access to high-speed broadband. Right, so that's very important. And okay, we have to make sure that the area has access to high-speed broadband. So that's helping solve the tools, so that they can have the tools to be able to connect with the pedagogy of whatever they're learning from. But we find that during this time, where social distancing is where distance learning is what's happening throughout our education system, the children that were slower, or the children that were more remedial, if we don't figure it out properly, the gap will be even bigger, because what's going to happen is that some kids are not only connecting to their school, not only connecting to the programs that they have, with their current grade during the summer. Also, during the summer and off school times, they are connecting with more distance learning programs around the world, because they have access to all these things around the world. And so they are getting experiences that they never even had, even in school. So now, if we don't properly figure out how to get folks to be able to tap into all the possible programs that are available online, then that's something that we have to make sure that we do. But again, it's a challenge and it's new, but we have to make sure that we get people connected, and that we bring the different programs, we show what the opportunities are, and that it's natural and normal to be able to enter these programs. One thing that's interesting, Vanessa, is that this generation, many of them are gamers. Many of them are gamers, right? So how do we gamify this learning? How do we use that, and how do we make sure that they are able to take advantage of all that's out there, because walls are breaking down, different programs are, we also found that in our district, we try to connect the young students to programs from some of our biggest higher learning programs that provide these programs for free. So how do we help incentivize that, and how do we build that and grow it?
Great. And Clyde, I know you're particularly passionate about blockchain technology, and you're very involved with government initiatives related to the license of the activity, but also spreading the word to the communities of how to empower them to use the technology. Could you shed a light a little bit more on your initiatives and how New York State is looking at the specific technology?
So now it's great. You know, you are, you know, in the company that you're with and in this organization that you're with, but most of the world still does not know what blockchain technology is. They do not understand it, and they don't have to understand it. They don't understand how the internet works. That's fine. But again, this is not a conversation in most of the world. But remember, years ago, and even now, um, we when lawmakers heard about this technology, when lawmakers heard about um, uh, cryptocurrency and digital currencies and tokens and all these different kinds of assets, um, we were confused by it. Folks didn't trust it. Folks didn't trust sometimes rightly or wrongly so, right? We could separate different actions and different kinds of things. But it was very important for us to try to get a handle of what this new asset class is, what this technology that undergirds it is, because there were a number of reactionary kinds of actions that government has done that, you know, I that felt that it may be detrimental to the industry. In any industry, you have good actors and bad actors. In every industry, you have these kinds of things. So it's very important for us to, the main thing we have to do, Vanessa, is try to understand, right? Try to understand it. And I mean, as a matter of fact, one of the things we did was we created a first, and it slowed down because of coronavirus, but we created a first in the country digital currency task force that consists of private, public, consists of academia, consists of someone from your organization to help figure out what, you know, where this asset class is going, what this technology is about, how what government's relationship with it should be, and how it can help communities. And that's something that we are, you know, we're trying to work through. And I believe that's very important for us to have these conversations. Vanessa, you yourself came up to cold Albany on a Saturday at a conference for the Black and Latino caucus to explain to people, to regular, not to lawmakers, but to the community, what blockchain technology is. And people, and you know, people enjoyed learning and still have questions, but that's okay. It's very important for us to be able to, for you to continue to educate, you know, folks on what this technology is.
And you said that, you know, the task force was a little bit slowed down due to COVID. What would you say the impact of COVID is on, you know, all these tech initiatives, not just blockchain, but has it accelerated things, or has it slowed down these types of initiatives and engagement with the communities?
So Vanessa, very interesting is that, you know, COVID changed the world, right? And it's continuing to change the world. So, you know, we're in a time where we're afraid, where we have to be mindful of human contact. That's mind blowing, right? We have to be mindful of human contact. But do you know what is closing that gap? Technology. We have to be very mindful as policymakers is that technology, without even what we're doing right now on Zoom, without being able to have, you know, you have an internet connection, I have an internet connection, you're on a laptop, I'm on a laptop. We have this internet that's behind it working. There are a lot of things that are going on. And now, Vanessa, we have the opportunity to communicate with the world, right? We're recording this. This is going to go, and you know, one of the things that for policymakers to understand is the importance and the need to properly use technology, to properly use these tools, and to be able to use the hardware, the software, the internet, and that is, that's something that we're looking at too, right? That's something that also we understand, Vanessa. We're also on the at the eve of a very big election, right? We're talking, a few months from now. I mean, we can't understate, there's no way I can overstate the importance of this election. And I'm not talking about one party or another, but I'm just talking, generally speaking, very important. This election is very important. And the main conversation that the lawmakers had for the big tech was about election interference through technology and message, whether or not, the platforms should correct false statements, whether or not they should allow us to be able to be able to say anything we want to say, whether or not they should be the arbiters of that information, how people can vote, should we use technology to vote, should we even use mail to vote? All of these questions are top of line. So, the position and where technology stands in the world and where it stands in New York, especially in our minds, is now even much more important and much more top of mind.
Yeah. Did the New York Assembly or the state governor take any, and I don't know who's responsible for what, take any specific initiatives relating to the vote, to enable citizens to vote without any, hindrance?
Yes, so we allowed, so we had a primary election back in June, and what we did, we allowed for voting. We allowed for no excuse absentee ballot voting, so that people were able to mail in their votes, and a lot of people take advantage of that opportunity to be able to do that. Also, what we've done is that we've had for our June election, we had practice to figure out the social distancing and the proper spacing for people to go and vote. And we also, in New York now, we have early voting, so that on election day, it doesn't have to be as crowded during election day. So that's something that we've had in place. And I know people have heard from Washington, D.C. that, that voting that mail-in voting is not secure or what have you. It is very secure. Many people have, we've had millions do it in June. We hope to make sure that we have a great program again in November. And we want to, encourage everyone to vote by absentee, or go out and vote, or go out and early vote in New York, because your vote does count. Please go out and vote.
So I want to move on now to sort of the impact of COVID on New York State, and how you as a legislator and a community leader have been reacting to a great deal of COVID cases, especially in Queens. So if you would be so kind to share your experience and what you did, through this crisis, I think our listeners would be very interested.
So, Vanessa, we were going through it, and actually you and I were in communications oftentimes, and it was just, I don't even want to live through that again. We had a situation where in New York City and New York State, we dealt with it, head on. We dealt with it early, but it was very difficult. We lost a lot of people. There was points where we were losing, almost 800 people a day. And I have people from my community that we lost. I know people that we lost, and it's not only a disease that takes away the elderly, though there were young people that passed. And it was a very difficult, and it's still difficult to make sure that we properly address this pandemic. We have been in New York State, though we have been in New York City, we have been, for the most part, abiding by what we need to do. Again, there have been some exceptions, but for the most part, we have been, just if you look at our numbers, we have, I'm very proud of New Yorkers. I'm very proud of New York City. I'm very proud of what we're doing, how we are really addressing how to minimize the transmission of this virus. In New York, it's not taboo to wear a mask. I mean, it's okay. As a matter of fact, there's mask fashion. I mean, New York is so crazy. It's so New York. I love New York so much that there's actually mask fashion. People actually have different masks for their different outfits. So, and one of the things that's okay is that we actually are promoting proper social distancing in New York. Again, there are exceptions. People mess up or what have you, but generally speaking, just look at the numbers. New Yorkers have really addressed it properly, well, and stepped up, and we're going to continue to push and promote that. And this is happening across communities where we are properly showing the world, how to manage, in a world post-COVID. And we're excited, that we are really turn these numbers around. But it's still difficult for us. I mean, we're talking about, a month from now, how to, what to do with schools. And, so there's no easy answers, right? So, there are families that can afford to have all their kids at home, right? And social distance. But there are families that have to, need childcare, and their kids have to go to school in order for them, to continue. How do we do it? How do we reconcile that? There are teachers that, imagine in your school, your teacher actually passed last year. Do you want to go back to school in that situation, in that environment? I mean, so these are difficult, these are really difficult questions to ask. And then we have people that are essential workers. We have first responders that need the child care. How do we do that? How do we answer that? And these are not easy questions. These are not easy logistical issues to work through. It's very difficult, but we're going to try to make our way through.
And so when you see the impact of COVID, of course, on human lives, but also on the economic activity, what is your reading of, how New York State is going to support economic activity in, the next year while we power through this crisis? And how can you help citizens make it through this crisis?
So we want to try to make sure, how's the sound? Can you hear this? Is this too loud? Or
No, it's good.
Yeah, we want to make sure that that people are able to have their businesses survive coronavirus. This is a question that's happening across the world, and we want to make sure that, number one, our businesses, our entrepreneurs have access to the programs that we had on the city level, on the state level, and the federal level, right? So we got to make sure that, you know, and there are different programs that we have. Two, we want to make sure that that they are, you know, that they, you know, that they are able to pivot if need be, right? That they're able to use technology. We have the conversation before coronavirus, Vanessa, for some businesses were, should I accept credit cards or not? I don't want to, you know, I'm just a cash business. I'm not, you know, I don't want to be, we can't have that same conversation now. We have to make sure that, number one, not only do they, you know, use and they make it less friction so that they're able to receive value, they have to think about all the different ways to receive these assets and different values. Many businesses now, all businesses now, have to integrate technology better. You don't have an option. If you want to be in business, you have to be able to have a technology component to your business. In government, in order for us to continue, in order for us to have session, we have to integrate technology. We have to be able to vote by technology and be able to have and to be able to connect it. So our businesses are even more so have to make sure that, you know, they have a certain relationship with technology. Now, many businesses can't have a chief technology officer. Okay, great. How does the government help make sure that the smaller businesses have training and access to technological tools? And we're not saying that you have to have a tech department, but you have to have, you know, if you're a small business, you have to be able to accept value. You have to be able to use, and I don't want to talk about all the different ways you can accept money, but you have to be able to have accounts to be able to accept this value easier in this type of world.
So you see a strong digitization of our economy, especially for smaller businesses, that's accelerating.
Wait, hold on one second. Hold on.
Right, Clyde is at a conference, so he needs to probably answer something. We'll give him a few seconds.
Sorry about that.
No problem. I was saying, so you see a very strong digitization of the smaller businesses happening in New York City or New York State?
Yes and no, but Vanessa, we have no choice. If you want to survive, so let's put business to the side. What about churches? What about, right? So we had to have and I'm government, right? There's a separation of church and state. But there's a problem where I found with my smaller churches that they weren't, you know, they didn't use these different platforms to be able to continue to connect with people. So it's very important for small businesses, small institutions to be able to use. Right now we're taking Zoom for granted, Vanessa. We take Google Meets for granted. I mean, me. We take these tools for granted. We have all these different ways to be able to connect. Many small businesses, you know, and small institutions, no, they were, whether or not they had the tools or not, but there's a barrier. Sometimes there's also an invisible barrier that they don't, you know. So we have to break down those walls where, you know, now with different platforms, right? It already lends for itself to be able to, you know, you don't need a whole new big production. It lends itself to be able to, for you to be able to connect with people, and that's part of the education. That's part of the education that we have to do. Another part of the education that we have to do is to say, look, you should be able to accept value easier. It should not only be a cash transaction. And in a world of, you know, in a world post-COVID, right? If cash is your only option, you're really not going to be able to survive. So as you know, so many of my colleagues have had programs and to make sure that, we help small businesses and small institutions be able to use, technology, and all the opportunities that it provides.
Great. So pivoting to another subject, which is unfortunately also highlighted during this time of crisis. So we've seen that COVID impacted significantly more minorities and populations with preconditions. Is there anything specific that legislators can do regarding that to also try to bridge the gap and not have these communities impacted in such a significant way?
So we have. We saw that. Now keep in mind, coronavirus affected everyone, right? But when you are at the bottom, you get affected by something that is universal, the worst. I mean, that's just what happens. And that's wrong. So one of the things that we have to do is, number one, stop the fire first. So we have to make sure that we properly had the proper tests. We found that early during the coronavirus pandemic, people from certain means were getting tested easier than folks from other means. So we had to, first of all, that's unfair. So we have to make sure that access to medical, to testing, access to healthcare was something that we had to make sure that was distributed more fairly. So that's something that we fought for. Also, we have to make sure that, again, healthcare is also always a big issue for people of less means. But long term, I don't want to make it more comfortable for folks at the bottom. Long term, we have to make sure we get folks out of the bottom, right? Long term, we have to make sure, so it's not just, oh my gosh, we have more testing in the poorer neighborhoods. Oh my God, we have more doctors in the poor, whatever. No. Change, how do we fix the underlying condition? How do we fix the poverty problem? How do we move people from poverty to middle class, and up? How do we solve that? How do we reduce the amount of poverty that we have in these kinds of communities? That's the main issue we have to deal with, because when we don't do that, we're gonna keep having, if it's not coronavirus, it's gonna be something else, it's gonna be something else, it's gonna be something else. So at a time where, and okay, that's a lot to say, but at a time where less jobs or what have you, what do? Well, what we've done in my office is that there are places that are hiring, there are opportunities, and what we have done, we identified many of the employers that are hiring to try to make sure that people try to get these jobs before the economy opens back up. You can say now, wow, there are people that we should not go to work, we should stay in or what have you. Look, as long as we are, do the proper social distancing and go through the proper process, some people have to work, and I want people to be able to go and get these jobs and work.
And the other subject I wanted to touch upon, we have 15 minutes left, and we'll take also some questions from the audience as we go along, is there was, in addition to the coronavirus, a huge civil rights movement related to the killing of George Floyd. And, you and I have, seen these police abuse and killings for years now. What do you think has really changed this time, where people really want to take action and say enough is enough? Do you think that, one, it's related to the information technology that everyone has now, the capacity to be together? What do you think will come out of this incredible movement?
So one thing is that it's very interesting how, the knee on George Floyd's neck, that people were able to see for almost 9 minutes, this man get his life suffocated from him. You couldn't hide that. Interesting to see how technology has a hand to that, right? Without the cell phone, without the internet, without the social media sending that out, that, that's something that is very interesting to see. At this moment, that changed things around the world. It, created a certain kind of movement where you can't unsee what you saw. You can't. And then we see all the other stuff that's going on around. We see Sandra Bland. We see what happened to Eric Garner. There's so many names that we know of that now we have to deal with it. And how do we deal with it properly? In New York State, we passed a number of reforms, as police reforms, but that's not enough. And guess what, Vanessa? The young people, the young generation, we can't fool them. They know what's BS and what's not BS. So how do we have true systemic change for the positive? And we're still wrestling with that. We're still trying to figure that out. The fact that we're having these conversations is great. Keep in mind that look at what's happening in sports now, where 4 years ago, Colin Kaepernick got really kicked out of the NFL for taking a knee. And now in sports, the conversation has changed. Now some people say it's fake or whatever. Conversation has fundamentally changed, right? There are teams that are changing the names of their mascot because the core name is racist. That's changing. These conversations are changing, and how do we make sure that we have a fair society? And this new generation is pushing us in ways that where we need to be pushed, and to be able to evaluate where we are and who we are as a nation and as a country and as a society.
So you mentioned, initiative that the legislator can take for, geared towards specific police brutality, and I guess training and a lot of things you can do. Is there anything that you've been thinking about curbing, systemic racism, also outside police brutality, something that is embedded in our societies and ways of lives? Is there a reflection around that? And what can the state do?
So police reform is just one thing to do. So if we talk about systemic racism in society, one thing that's very important, what I try to focus on is economic empowerment, right? So Black does not equal poor, right? Minority does not equal poor. So so my family came from a certain background. Both my parents are immigrants from Haiti. We came from my mom. Both my parents are uneducated, and I serve as a lawmaker. I'm an attorney. I'm an entrepreneur. Education and opportunity. I'm not dealing with, just because I'm Black doesn't mean I'm dealing with coronavirus the same way as other folks. So it's really a socioeconomic. That's the core of it. The core of it is poverty. The core of it is wealth. How do we change that gap? How do we close that gap? A person that owns, a Black person that owns businesses, that went to the same schools as you, they're not dealing with the stuff that everybody, so number one, we mischaracterize race with economic status. I keep in mind this stuff is very nuanced, but the most important thing I think is to be able to give people at the that are at the bottom opportunities to be able to not be at the bottom, and that is very important. So how do we do that? Keep in mind, it's very difficult when in one school system, education for in the inner cities is different than education somewhere else. How do we close that? We have to make sure we close that gap. How do we give people the opportunity for, very important to give people the opportunity for minority companies to be able to get economic opportunities, to be able to grow, to be able to grow. I think that's the major thing that we can do, is to be able to deal with the economics, and to be able to have tough questions, and to be able to have tough conversations, right? I think that, organizations and institutions have to be in a space where we close the gap of the racial divide and to be able to communicate with each other. I think that, that can help a whole lot.
I'm going to turn to the audience to see if there are any additional questions. Else, I have plenty of questions, but I want to give an opportunity to people to put questions in the chat. I know that one of my advisors at the Blockchain for Social Impact was struck by sort of the divide, even within one state, of the experience of voting. So interestingly enough, to your point about economic divide, the richer neighborhoods of that state, had a very easy experience voting, whereas the poorer neighborhoods had to deal with, day-long queues to be able to vote. So it would be interesting to know if New York State is doing anything about that, not only about the mail voting, but like the whole experience, during the day, and not having to have to take off a whole day to go voting.
Yeah, so look, we're trying to make sure, again, so one of the things we fought for is early voting. So in New York State, which is relatively new, you don't have to wait till election day to actually go and vote. So if you want to vote 10 days before the day of election, you have the opportunity to go in person to go vote. And the mail-in vote, we sent in absentee ballots to every single person in New York State. Some people didn't get it or whatever, but we tried. It was difficult to try to do, but and we have to make sure that people have, have access to the information about their rights for voting. And that's something that we have been promoting, that we continue to promote. We have to make sure that people have access to information. One of the things I'm promoting is to be able to have, we find that most people have smartphones. I don't care what socioeconomic background you have, but most, not all, but most people have smartphones. How do we make sure that, number one, those are connected to information, and that the government gets them the proper information at the right time, and where the barrier to that info is low. For example, so the governor, the mayor, the president, every day for months during the height of the corona pandemic, came and spoke and gave people information. If you had cable television, if you had the internet, you got that information. If you didn't, you didn't. So directly from the horse's mouth. So, one of the things we're looking at a technology with television broadcasting technology, where how do we, on a smartphone, how do we get the proper information to people directly? And I think that, with the proper information, with the proper access to information, it helps even the playing field for folks.
Great. Well, we're almost at the top of the hour. So I wanted to thank you for joining us while joining another conference at the same time. Much appreciated. Good luck, and thank you for everything that you do for New Yorkers in these trying times. And we hope to see you soon, and actually in person.
Well, Vanessa, thank you for having me. Thank you for Blockchain for Social Impact, what you guys are doing. We're really excited that this organization is here and doing projects around the world. So that's it's very important. And you guys are really helping with the relationship between policymakers and tech. Please continue to do the work, and it's more and more important that you continue to do so.
Thank you. Have a great day. Bye. Bye, everyone.